We go now to the International Newspaper Review. James Creedon's with me. James, you were telling me just before we came on air, incredible coverage in the Times this morning of Misrata.
Absolutely, Stuart. Slaughter in Misrata is their front page headline, with a photo of Tim Hetherington, well-known photographer and documentary maker, a British guy who was killed yesterday in a mortar bomb in Misrata. Now, this is an amazing piece because it's written by James Hyder, journalist for the Times in Misrata, and he witnessed Tim Hetherington's death, in fact, and the death also of Chris Hondros, an American photographer who was also killed yesterday, along with 8 civilians, and a further 12 were wounded. Now, what's amazing about this piece is, despite the fact that he witnessed the death of a friend and a fellow journalist yesterday, he wrote this incredibly tight and accurate report of what's happening in Misrata, which I found quite incredible. Now, if we have a look at this photo on the website, that shows Tim Hetherington climbing out of a shelled building yesterday. That was just hours before he was in fact killed. Now, they were covering a battle for the control of a bridge over Tripoli Street in Misrata, which is at the front line in the civil war in Libya. It's a port city of some 300,000 people. Gaddafi's forces were trying to retake this bridge, and that's when the incident happened. Now, Hyder speaks about having had lunch with Tim Hetherington just 2 weeks ago, and he was talking about how he wanted to slow down, have children, etc. Then he says, I watched him fade away in front of me in a tent outside an overcrowded clinic in this dying city, just 2 weeks after that lunch happened. Further details about what is actually happening in Misrata. Cluster bombs are raining down on the city. They were designed to disable airports and were internationally banned last year. Over Misrata, they fall every 10 minutes. He describes a city under siege with people absolutely determined to fight Gaddafi. In each neighbourhood, you have families and kind of networks of cousins, school teachers, even with their pupils fighting Gaddafi's forces, determined to keep him at bay, because they say they know what will happen otherwise, that Gaddafi's forces will show no mercy. Now, just some photos as well on the website this morning. There's a photo here that Hetherington took in 2007 and won the World Press Photo of the Year, showing a US soldier in a bunker in Afghanistan. The next photo is of Chris Hondros, the American photographer who also died yesterday in Misrata. He was a Pulitzer Prize nominated photojournalist. And the next photo is one taken by Hondros yesterday, again, just hours before he passed away, showing rebels trapping Gaddafi fighters in a building. So we're getting some pretty incredible coverage in the Times this morning of what's happening in Misrata.
Yeah, very emotional. Looks like that's well worth a read. OK, well, let's move on to other things. The Independent with Bahrain.
Yes, indeed, and it's going into a lot of detail about Bahrain as well. Bahrain's secret terror. Now, they got their hands on emails sent by a surgeon in Bahrain to a British colleague. It describes a campaign of intimidation where at least 32 doctors have been arrested and detained by Bahrain's police in the last month. This, of course, goes against the Geneva Conventions. Many of the doctors were disappeared in pre-dawn raids. The emails are quite extraordinary. One describes interrogation committees questioning me about my role in treating the injured protesters. Another describes a doctor, an intensive care specialist, who was held. Why? Because she was photographed crying over a dead protester. So pretty awful things happening in Bahrain as well.
And another exclusive in The Guardian, this time to do with Darfur.
Yes, indeed, and they have quite a striking headline. Conflict in Darfur is my responsibility, says Omar Bashir. He is, of course, a Sudanese president. Now, it's a mea culpa without really being a mea culpa. It's his first interview since the pending arrest warrant by the International Criminal Court. So he says, basically, that, of course I am the president, so I'm responsible for everything that happens in the country. But then he says that they were insurgents in Darfur, that we had human losses, that the death tolls have been greatly exaggerated, that it's the duty of the government to fight the insurgents, but we did not fight the people of Darfur. The UN estimates some 300,000 people were killed there. So, interesting interview in The Guardian this morning.
And finally, you're going to finish up with stories of Mubarak in the New York Times.
And some people who regret how he's been treated since he was forced out of power. They speak to Salma Soeilen. She says, I don't want my boyfriend to hear this, but he'll get mad. But Mubarak is an old man. He's sick. His sons are in prison. That's enough. So the journalist in Cairo for the New York Times describes a very complex situation of emotions, basically, where people kind of don't really know how to feel about things. They feel that perhaps he's had enough, I suppose, targeting, leave the man in peace now. That's one set of emotions, at least, in
James,
Egypt.
Thank you very much. Some incredible stuff in the written press today, by the sound of it. That's James Creedon with the International Press Review.